to do now is just do a 2024 economic review. A lot has happened, and we just thought, you know what, let's get a group of people who can give us their synopsis and their understanding of what 2024 was like, and maybe what's going to happen in 2025. So outline, we've got the guys that have joined. So we have Rangamberi, I can see there. I can see Brains, I can see Butle, Janet, and then we're supposed to have Mutisi. Okay, all right. I suppose to just kick off, maybe let's start with Brains. Brains, would you like to just give us your view of 2024? What has it been like? What are your thoughts, and where are we as a country?
Sinashi, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, you can, loud and clear.
Yeah. So sorry, back to your question. What is here?
All right.
I thought
give us your view.
To introduce me.
Okay, so give us your view. Yeah, you can. Everybody knows you. Brains Mchemwa is an economist in Zimbabwe. So give us your view.
I was just
could you give us your view of the economic situation of Zimbabwe 2024? Okay, so Mtisi has joined us as well. So we'll give the floor to Brains, and maybe Brains, you can start. Just give us your view.
What are you drinking, Brains, before you get into the weeds?
Look, I'm smoking. I'm not drinking. So yeah.
What are you smoking,
I can
Brains?
actually
Something legal.
I can see some smoke just behind you. So yeah, you're not kidding.
Exactly. So I don't want to promote any brand here, but just know that I'm smoking something.
Okay.
Tinashi, 2024. It has been quite a difficult year, I guess, for the greater part of the year, in particular, when you look at what has been happening in the market. From a liquidity perspective, even from a government revenue collection perspective, the interest rates have been quite high as well. The statutory reserves increased. The banks got a huge squeeze. So it's not been an easy year, more so compounded by the fact that we have a drought that has really ravaged the country, and that has really affected a lot in terms of the ability of this economy to conserve liquidity, because we've had to import a lot of maize. So yeah, that's my general overview of the economy. It's been a difficult year for business. We hope that 2024 is going to be a better year.
Same question. I will give it to Ranga. Ranga, please go ahead. Give us first your 3 minutes of your overview of the economic situation. 2024.
Sasta, before you do that, mambo kwa samri zita andika. Good to see you, my guy. Good to see you.
Iranga, what are you drinking?
The world's finest drink, Mazoe.
Well done. You're in good company.
Yeah. So yeah, it's been one of those years, hasn't it? I remember back in January, we wrote an article just looking at what the year was going to look like, and it turns out it was actually worse than we thought, because number one, of the drought, and number two, which was a big deal as well, the commodity price crash. So you've got a situation where the government was waiting for this big boom in lithium, for example. They were waiting for this big pile of cash to come out of lithium, but it didn't happen. Lithium was selling at 80,000 in ton 2 years ago. Now they're down to 10,000 if you're lucky. So that's what's happened, and so a lot has happened this year, and we are hoping for better next year, like Brain said. But hey, it's hard to look at the outlook and see where the positives might come out of.
Okay, thank you very much for that short synopsis. Let's have Utle from a woman's perspective. Let's hear your thoughts. What was 2024 like? And also, you can chime in as far as the budget is concerned. And what are your thoughts there? Just your quick 2-3 minutes.
Hi, I don't know, can you guys hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay. So I think from a woman's perspective, I think 2024 was more or less like what it was in the previous year. And I think we continued in that, it continued being in that space where we keep hoping that there will be reprieve from the minister. We keep hoping that things will change, but they don't. At some point, we say, we don't really care about the budget. But of course we do, because we keep having like a wish list. We wish we could have this, we could have that. Things don't change. So I think for many women, I think I'd speak for many, it was more or less like in previous years. I've listened to the gentleman giving us the statistics about, the price of lithium and stuff. I think for us, it's more about the everyday life, like in the home, to say how do you run a household and, with less and less disposable income. Because as you know, whether you are married or not, usually the household, it is the mother who does the budget. So I think from household level, it's becoming more and more difficult for us to run the household. Because I think the balancing, when we have fewer cents to work with, price increases in the shop, because I think at some point you could buy tomatoes like $1 for $6. I think right now you can find $1 for $3, $4, but even then they are smaller. So I think from us at that very basic household level, we do have less money to spend. And I think for us as well, the issue of ZESA, for me, it's been a very tough year because now now you don't know whether it's the fault or it's not shedding. It goes for 3-4 days, So what does that mean? It means whether I am the mother or I am the help in the house because I have to run the household. It means I have to wake up maybe at 12 and iron the uniform. The kids have to go to school for those who have young children. I'm lucky with men. But there are so many women with young children that still go to school. So that becomes a problem. And again, when we have less disposable income, it also affects our access to basic services like health, for example. And we know that our public health system is not really in good shape. But how many of us can afford to go to private doctors? So I think, generally it's been a very tough year for the women, particularly towards the end with the ZESA.
All right. Thank you very much. And then we've got TC. Kudzi, tell us, your 2-3 minutes. Give us your overview of 2024 and your thoughts there.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you guys see me and hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay, awesome. I think 2024 was a terrible year for everyone across the board. For the ordinary person on the streets, I think there were 2 massive devaluations of the currency. In the early part of the year, the Zim dollar, as it was called, crashed, and it means people lost their savings, people lost value. Then the ZiG was introduced. A few months later, it also was massively devaluated. So people lost value twice during the year. This is in terms of the ordinary person on the streets. And then you go to government itself, in terms of revenue collection, they were also struggling. Their current policies, per se, they ended up affecting them in that formal businesses were struggling because of the monetary policy. And when formal businesses are struggling, the government is going to struggle and everyone in the economy is going to suffer. So it was a terrible year. But we can also, even though we can blame government policies and all that, there was a drought, which the colleagues have already mentioned. Terrible drought, which means the ordinary person does not have food on the table. The government has to provide assistance to some low-income households. That's a strain again on the fiscal side for the government. So it was really, really a bad year throughout for everyone, the government, business, and also ordinary people. It's even the diaspora themselves. People in the diaspora also suffered because they had to chip in to support the families back home. So it was quite a bad year for Zimbabweans.
Okay, thank you for that. So maybe let's go into the particular sectors. So I'll start with you, Brains. Let's talk about the informal sector and the formal businesses. We've seen huge tax and more regulation. What are your thoughts there? Will Mthuli be able to, get his budget revenue from the informal sector? And is the informal sector surviving? Is it actually going to survive? What are your thoughts there? Brains, you're on mute. Okay, we seem to have lost them. Okay, so maybe Ranga, you can come in as far as the energy sector and the mining sector is concerned. What's actually been the actual performance?
Yeah, I think Uche said it best. I think since 2019, I think the last I remember having no power for 12, 17 hours was possibly back in 2019. And again, it's not something that we don't know. We know the reasons. For 43 years, we haven't invested quite enough in energy. So this is catching up us. I'll give an example. Right now, the mining industry alone, it needs 2,500 megawatts of power. Right now, all the projects that are currently going on and the new ones. But the country as a whole is producing, when we're lucky, 1,100 megawatts. So already, even if we give the mines all the 2,500 megawatts that they want today, we're still not going to catch up with the actual demand in the country. So that's a lot to do really with our failure to invest in energy. So it's been very difficult. So the only green light that we've seen, as it were, is some of the solar projects that have come through. Mines have had to take up the mantle, as it were, and build their own solar plants. We've seen guys like Central Gate putting up 25 megawatts here, 5 megawatts in Tirikwi, which is all great news. In fact, we should be celebrating some of those guys. They are pulling miracles. I mean, in the environment where you don't know whether you're going to be paid in Zim dollars or you're going to be paid in US dollars at a low tariff. So these guys have really done well. But is it enough? No, nowhere enough. I think we need the government itself to get itself in order and get as much investment as they possibly can in energy. So we can talk about growth and 6% growth, like Mthuli is saying, for next year, but it's hard to see that happening with 17-hour power cuts. I mean, how are you going to run a factory? How are you going to run even a clinic? How are you going to run a school? Right now, clinics are really depending on solar power donated by some of the governments that we rant about. So that's a bit of an embarrassment for us as a country. I think we just need to get ourselves in order in terms of energy.
Ranga, you're talking of blackouts, 17, 18-hour blackouts throughout the year, this year, primarily because of the drought and primarily because of our own problems at Wange. The issue I want to raise is when you look at Mthuli's budget, it actually looks at electricity, and there's been a growth of about 3.1%, economic GDP growth in the energy sector. Where's that coming from? If we know that we're not even able to meet the 2,000 megawatts that we're supposed to be producing. So how do you reconcile what's actually happening on the ground and what Mthuli is actually saying?
Well, I would guess, my guess to Nasha is looking at the 600 megawatts that came on stream during the year. God knows what would have happened if we didn't have that 600 megawatts. I think we haven't said that story enough. The 600 megawatts have been our saving grace. Imagine if those hadn't come through, if Wange hadn't come through with units 6 and 7, where we would be in terms of energy, we would be 600 less. So right now we're producing, let's say, around 400 megawatts, which isn't enough to power all our cities. So I think I would imagine that's where is looking at the growth in terms of output. But again, it's not about the output; it's about where the demand is versus what we're actually producing.
Okay. And as far as mining is concerned, I mean, gold production, we're expecting about 35 tons. That's one of the highest that we've had in the last, 7 years or so. I think the last was in 2018 where we had such, gold output. Isn't that, something to celebrate?
Yeah, well, yes, it is. By November, our gold mines at 32 tons. Last year, over the same period, we were at 30 tons. So it's very possible that we are going to get to the target of 35 tons by the end of December. So again, it's one of the better stories of the year. We've seen Caledonia, who operate Blanket Mine, coming through with a lot more production. We've seen Dalaglio doing the same. We've seen companies like Bulawayo Mining Company, for example, who have really come through this year with more production and more processing capacity. So that's one of the better stories in the mining sector. The problem always is there that you look at the production and say, okay, 32 tons is really good, but we really should be around 60 if you really think about it with the capacity that we have in our mining sector. We have a lot of idle mines that really need investment. So I think that's where the government should be really focused at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much. Utle, let's speak to the budget and women issues, because I think that's a particular pain point for you. And let's speak to it. What are the issues that you think needed to be addressed and weren't actually addressed?
Thank you so much. I think for me, the first issue is to just point out that I don't think that the budget was pro-poor. I think when the minister was first appointed, he kept on talking about, pro-poor budget. In my view, it is not. Maybe economists will think it is, but I don't think so. Because I think what's happening is the minister keeps introducing more and more taxes, but these are not translating to better access to services, for example. Yeah? Because I would imagine that if I'm paying taxes, and I think this is what used to happen in the 80s, because I grew up in the 80s, right? I think our parents used to pay taxes, and that meant that, if I was at school, I got injured, I could just go with my friends to the local clinic. I didn't go to Mpilo. Mpilo is a referral hospital, like Paral, right? So I would just go to the local clinic, get treated, if I needed to dressing out, I would go there, because then I remember they'll talk about paying, it was, I think, some sort of rate, because sometimes if you didn't pay, they would, I think city council would recover that money somehow when your parents paid rate. It was like the card, the housing card, I don't know what they used to call it, but something like that. So that system used to work with a very functional primary healthcare system. Now it's not so much, I don't want to say dysfunctional, but I think maybe it's near dysfunctional. Because what we have now is a situation where anybody with even a minor ailment, everybody is going from Mpilo, everybody is going to Paralenia. And what does that mean? It means the nurse, and we will blame them because we are patients who want service. But that nurse is overwhelmed because she's now having to look after, more patients than she's actually supposed to, right? And then at the same time, she's grossly underpaid, right? But then she's got a long queue of people that she has to look after. And in my view, when we listen to the minister presenting the budget, it doesn't look like government acknowledges that there is a problem in the health sector. I mean, he can say something, I think it's nice. He can throw words here and there, but those words don't really translate to anything tangible. I can give you an example. I think our budget, we've never reached the 15%. That is that the government agreed with other governments in the budget declaration. Other than that, I think the funding that is going towards health is actually, diminishing, right? I don't have the specific figures, but I know definitely the investment in the health sector has gone down. And for me as a woman, it's particularly annoying, I think, from government, because here you are taking more and more taxes, you are taking more money from our pocket, but we still don't get the service. Like I said, for me, that is a major problem. With the government taking money from us, but we are not really seeing the results. I can give you an example. For example, I was talking to the director of Community Working Group on Health, Mr. Itai Rusik, and he was telling me that I asked him about village health workers. The village health workers are very important in the rural area because they then are like the bridge between, the big, sort of like what you can call maybe the big mainstream health sector and the communities. Because these are communities that are like far away from the big hospitals, far away from the clinics. So village health workers play a very critical role. He tells me that in the past 2 years, because the funding for the village health workers comes from the Global Fund, used to come also from the Health Development Fund and government. But unfortunately, like in all other cases, again, which is I think it's an indictment on our government. Government doesn't come to the party with its contribution. So what we have now, I think the Health Development Fund, I think, finished 2 years ago. So it's now just the Global Fund that is funding the village health workers. So these women are getting $15 a month. That is what they're getting. It's like a, stipend, $15 a month. They're in the rural areas. Apparently the uniforms, the bicycles that they use all come from the Global Fund. Our government hasn't come through. And I'm saying, why is the government not coming to the party? Yeah, and it's a particular concern for us as women because, those village health workers, particularly, for women, because women might not have access to, like something as simple as family planning tablet. I mean, if I'm in Harare here, I can go to any clinic. But these are women maybe who stay 20, 30 kilometers away from the nearest health facility. So the village health workers are actually playing a critical role. But they've also, they're getting like $15 a month. What do you buy? And then actually they remove $1 for admin fee. So you're left with $14. So this means that there are more and more women and children who are not able to access health facilities in the road. So it's a very big concern for us because we are saying if government is taking money from us, why is it that they're not investing in social services? It's a very big issue for us.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I think it's loud and clear. The health sector is a pain point, and the budget hasn't been able to address that. So, Kunzi, I've got a question for you, and I think you highlighted the 2 devaluations that happened during the year, the beginning of the year, when it was ZWL, as well as in just after the middle of the year, I think in September, when we then had a ZIG devaluation. And, if you add those 2, you're looking at close to 90% of value lost in a year in just one currency. But when we look at the inflows, as far as the inflows are concerned, we're now breaching, closer to 12 billion US dollars coming into the country. What is the problem? Why would we suffer so much in terms of devaluations when we're actually increasing the amount, coming into the country?
Okay, thank you for that question. I think Butle has highlighted something here. We have a budget, but if the budget is just numbers. It's just numbers that the Minister of Finance can just say. In the end, it's about the allocations and the revenue collections. How much is he collecting and how much is he allocating to who? These devaluations, they were also affecting the government itself in terms of that revenue they were collecting in local currency. Obviously, it also lost value along the chain. And because of that, they cannot fund the social services for the ordinary person. The problem that we have is the political elites will never cut their own, they will never cut their own luxuries. So if they have to get a car, they will still have to get a car during the year. If they have to get a bonus, they will still get a bonus. It's now the person in the village who is going to feel the brunt of that. But this devaluation, as you pointed out, I think it's because of the market distortion. It doesn't really matter how much a US dollar is coming in, Forex is coming into the country. What matters is how much of it is available on the Forex market. See, so demand is there on the Forex market, but the supply is not there. There is no supply because if Putle receives $500, for example, there is no incentive to sell it on the Forex market. Why? Because you can simply go to a shop and buy with that currency. So as long as we have the multi-currency system, there is not going to be much stability in the local currency, because there is always going to be a mismatch in terms of the supply of forex currency, a foreign currency, and also the demand. Because everyone in Zimbabwe who has got a local currency wants to change it to forex. So there's always a demand for foreign currency. But the people who have got the foreign currency, they have no incentive to sell it to anyone. So the supply now there's going to be, I will call it an artificial shortage on the market. So it doesn't matter how much forex is coming in the country, the market is not balanced. So that's my view. It's not a useful market per se. It's not balanced in terms of demand and supply.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Janet has joined us, and Janet is a guru on debt. And let's talk about that, because we saw our national debt increasing, both local as well as foreign debt. I think now it's close to $21 billion US. Would you like to speak to that, Janet? What's actually been happening as far as the debt is concerned in 2024?
Thank you so much, Tinashe, and hello, everyone. The issue really around debt is of concern. Probably to first as well appreciate that it's been good in terms of increased debt transparency that the minister has been sharing in terms of where our debt stands. We may have issues in terms of really is it exactly where it is, and coming of course from the debt justice movement, they are always push that let's do a proper debt audit to exactly know how much we owe. But at least we are always given something to work with, and we do have that something to work with, and that's the debt figures that the minister is always bringing together with the national budget. And it is a big issue and a big concern that our debt really shot up in 2024. We saw almost the figures that we have, they're ranging between 21 to 23 billion, and 85% of it being external debt, and that external debt being the arrears and penalties. And we know as well of the process that has gone on in 2024 in terms of the high-level debt dialogue process, which began in 2022, but to date has also not then unlocked a conversation around clearing those arrears, but also to have a framework for debt relief for Zimbabwe. And this is because of the various reforms within the three areas of governance, the land reform, and also the economic reforms that the government has to implement. So those probably have not really gone hand in hand in terms of what has got to happen. So we have a huge debt stock combined, both external and also domestic debt. 85% of that debt is actually in external debt, and about 15% is in domestic debt. And probably two key issues really in the budget is around the rollover of the treasury bills into the 2025 budget, but also the non-negotiable certificates for deposits, and how we have gotten government domestic bonds and other domestic instruments that the government is using for the domestic debt market. And this really creates huge challenges in terms of the accumulated arrears to international financial institutions, which the current process has not managed to resolve. The limited access, of course, to new external funding that is concessionary remains, and we take it once again in the 2025 budget. And the need for debt restructuring or clearance strategy, really to rethink and say, how are we going to move forward since the previous high-level debt dialogue platforms that have been held, facilitated by the facilitators that we are aware of. I think that process, we need to really review it and say, how are we going to move going forward so that we get a resolution from this aspect. But on the domestic debt pressures, which I think is really of major concern, and we have been raising it from the debt justice movement, it's around the treasury bills rollover risk, and a large volume of them maturing in 2025. And what does that mean in terms of limiting domestic investor base? The issue around refinancing, the high refinancing costs that are expected, and also the risk of the domestic debt spiral. I think because we also don't have the external debt lines, it means we will rely quite a lot on the domestic market, and this is a big issue. And then on the non-negotiable certificate of deposits, I think it's also a major concern that we need to highlight as we look into the 2025 fiscal year in terms of the significant redemptions that are due in 2025 in that respect, and how that is going to really constrain the fiscal space for that redemption, and also the potential impact that has on the RBZ balance sheet. We know that the government has significantly assumed some of the debts from the RBZ so that it can really focus on its core mandate of being the central bank. But now, with this, I think there is that potential for it to really impact on the RBZ debt balance sheet. And a really big conversation, local Zimbabwean conversation is needed when it comes to the debt resolution that we need. And I'm sure colleagues on the panel have also shared in terms of how this impacts the whole economy. And it's a big elephant in the room when we really look at the debt question. And what we really relied on in terms of bringing together the data with the Zimbabwean government and the creditors, that platform or process initiated in 2022 does not seem to be going anywhere. So what is it that we're going to do in 2025 is a big question that we have and that we need to take forward.
Janet, could you speak to parastatal debt as well? Because, there's a huge debt. So when you look at Wange, we're operating losses. There's a debt that we're picking up there. There's ESIM debt. There's debt in a number of these parastatals that perhaps is not being accounted for in our national statistics, but it's somewhat affecting us. GMB subsidies, those sort of things. Could you just give us a synopsis of what's actually happening there and if there's any light at the end of the tunnel?
So really part of the debts that we have as well is the assumption from parastatals that are not performing. And I think there are many instruments that the government has tried to use in terms of bailing out such parastatal for the move for assumption of debts. We have had, for example, the Zamaco before, the non-performing loans facility where they were being put in there and all that. So that remains really a key and critical issue for us to have a conversation about. And I think, like you are saying, Tinashe, we really have an issue in ascertaining in terms of what is the exact debt when it comes to parastatals, which is why probably there is the push that we are talking about in terms of a debt audit for us to really know which parastatal is owing what, and is it a publicly guaranteed debt? Because there's also that conversation that how then does the government publicly guarantee such debts? It's also from those parastatals, but also from the private sector. We saw after COVID that the government also publicly guaranteed quite a number of debts to ensure that the private sector, especially hospitality, could once again rebound after the COVID-19. But I think it's a big conversation that has contributed to part of the legacy debts. When we're talking about the legacy debts that we talk about in Zimbabwe, part of it really is around those parastatals, some of them that are not functioning anymore. We had at one point debt, for example, from this was still as an example, where it was even to do with the human resources. We are saying, how do we clean their balance that we can get new investors that can come and offer, and we begin to have industry functioning. So it's a big as well elephant in the room in terms of the parastatals debts, but there are also parastatals that also give services. For example, yes, I think those are some of them that we'll be looking at and saying, what is it that we have to do? And I think difficult conversations have always come from there. Do we commercialize? Do we privatize? Where do we go when it comes to the issue of parastatals? But I think the issue of legacy debts within those and how that impacts on the debt stock is a big issue that needs debt instruments that would address that. But those debt instruments, they have the potential to constrain, like we have said, the fiscal base, but also to make the debt balloon even further. So it's a big conversation. It's something that we need probably an engagement with the Public Debt Management Office in terms of ascertaining exactly the parastatals debt, the publicly guaranteed debts, as they stand as well coming from that sector and saying, how do we move forward and how does the government alleviate that debt problem and ensure that, but with ensuring that it's not also making the debt really shoot up the roof in terms of what we already owe in our domestic debt portfolio. I think it's a big issue. It's a conversation as well for 2025, I guess, as we move forward in terms of even enhancing the performance of those parastatals and say, how do we move forward?
Okay, thank you. So last questions around the panel. So I'll start with Ranga. Ranga, we saw retrenchments in the mining sector. So I think Zimplats and other mining companies, Rio Tinto, I think, serious challenges there. Would you like to speak to where are we as far as the mining sector and what sort of performance do you think we're going to get into 2025?
Well, yeah, thanks, Tinashe. I think it's a bit of a difficult one because most of the forecast right now for gold, for example, gold was really having a really good year in 2023 until Donald Trump decided to come back into power. And then the gold prices have started coming off quite a bit from their record highs. So gold was really firing high, and so gold mines really did well. They didn't retrench. On the other hand, you had your platinum and your lithium mines retrenching. For example, we saw platinum, Zimplats. They had a loss. I mean, it was rare to hear the word Zimplats and loss, the words Zimplats and loss in the same sentence, but they did have a loss last year at the end of the previous year. So they had to put on hold a lot of projects. And the ripple effect is that your suppliers also have employees, and they also have to retrench down the chain. It's also happened to the lithium guys. I know the guys at Bikita, for example, have stopped one of their new plants. So that means all the suppliers also send their own people home. So it really depends on what happens on the global markets. There are a lot of things that are really out of our control as price takers in the industry. So there's a lot of water to still go under the bridge. We don't know how the lithium price is going to pan out next year because it depends on who you speak to. Or one house will say that it's going to come back up. Even some of the lithium people are saying that the price has reached a bottom. But are we going to get as much investment as we did in 2022? I doubt that very much. So I think for our government, the big task, in my opinion, is really to focus on two things: diversifying the industry and focusing on energy. There are a lot of energy companies now who are really, really willing to come into Zim and produce power. What they've been given the last year is guarantees that we're going to give you a workable tariff. We're going to give you 9 cents a kilowatt hour so you can get your project off the ground. I think that's where our government needs to focus on, because you can talk about diversifying away from commodities, which are really unpredictable at the moment. But then you can't diversify into your industry if you don't have the energy to do that. And you can't diversify if your skills, if your people are running away from the country at the rate they are at the moment. So I think that's where the government needs to focus on. So I think if that happens, I think we do have a chance at a turnaround. But it's not going to happen all of this on. It's going to take a lot of work.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you to read your tea leaves. Do you think that in the mining sector we've seen the worst of the carnage, and perhaps we might see some sort of stability, and or Donald Trump will just ensure that the gold price go even lower and lithium prices, it's, drill baby drill. So that's good as far as oil is concerned.
Yeah.
But I don't know what's going to happen with lithium and gold and everything else. But yeah, let's hear let's hear what you think.
Well, like I said, when we started in January this year, we predicted that things are going to get bad, and things didn't get bad; they turned out worse. So I'd rather not. But I think there are a lot of exciting projects in the mining sector. For example, we've got the Karo Platinum project that's really been delayed by the platinum price crash. I mean, they are putting in 391 million into that project. If that comes out, well, that's jobs for our people. There are a lot of nice projects that we're watching as well in the energy space that we think will get off. We'll start working in 2025. We'll be watching those. So I think there is some excitement also in construction. It has slowed down the last quarter, but I think there's still a lot of room there to grow. Agriculture as well. I think hard as it might be with the drought that's going on, I think in terms of horticulture, for example, we're seeing a lot of growth, seeing a lot of new names coming in. So yeah, I don't want to say I'm optimistic, but look, optimism is as optimism goes in Zimbabwe. I think a lot of industries will thrive, but it's really where how widespread that thriving, if you want to call it, can be in Zimbabwe.
All right, thank you very much, Ranga. Utle, maybe let's hear your thoughts and views. What do you think is going to happen in 2025? What should we be worried about, and what should we be excited about?
I'm not sure whether we have much to be excited about, but I mean, we're Zimbabweans. We are known for saying at least. So maybe, we'll be saying at least we are still alive. At least we are still, able to eat 1 or 2 meals, whatever that means. But I think really for me, I'm glad Janet talked about conversations. So I think one of the conversations that we need to be having as a country is really around accountability and transparency and accountability. Because as I'm sitting here, I'm very annoyed, I am angry, I am livid, any word you can think of. Because, like, in my view, the minister is no longer the minister of finance, really. He's now the minister of taxes. Because he keeps taking, cents from our pockets. And I think there's a misconception where I see a lot of the times on social media. People say, but in Mazimba, you don't pay tax. But we do. Because there's value-added tax. If I buy bread, I'm paying that. At the same level with a man who makes $5,000 a month and I only make $100, I'm being taxed. If I want to go and get treated at the clinic, I pay $5. That money that they say Maria card. Those are fees. Those are service fees. I think even when you apply for a passport for 53 bucks, the 3 bucks goes to government somehow. Think about even when you buy this, and there's a percentage that goes towards rural electrification. I would like to know, for example, within just the past 5 years, how much money has been raised through those, maybe even just electrification fund, how much money has been raised, and what has that money been used for? Because you can't keep on, you can't, I quit my 18-hour power cut. So I don't know whether is the minister thinking of, or not minister personally, but I'm saying government, are they thinking of taking some of that money and investing in changing the fortunes in the energy sector? I don't know. So I think another big conversation we need to have as a country is around transparency and accountability. And again, on the energy sector, I don't know if people remember that in 2022, there was a report in the Standard that I think, many government officials had solar panels, but to alleviate the power problem. But what about us, the poor? What happened? So I think because then I think for me as a taxpayer, it becomes unfair. You as a minister, you keep taking money from our pocket, but we are not seeing that translate into service provision. And another thing, I think as a citizen of the country, of course, I'm not an economist, but I'm saying I think all of us in the panel may remember a time when the economy was a bit more functional. And I think when the economy is a bit more functional, all of us have got a role to play. All of us want to participate meaningfully and contribute to the growth of the economy. But how do I do that in this net disposable income? Because that's what is happening. I think the minister is at a loss. He keeps taking money from people that no longer have anything at all. So it means there's something missing somewhere. I don't know what economists call it, but there's something missing somewhere. I think there's supposed to be some sort of balance. And the minister is really, really struggling. I think it's really at his wit's end. Because yes, government has to collect taxes. But I think then there's a problem there. Because you're collecting taxes from me. And again, for me, the issue of taxes is a very sore point. Because when you're looking at it from a feminist point of view, a lot of the women are in the informal sector. right? And I know a couple of months ago, Zimra was on a serious rampage. They were going to the salon, sitting there looking at the ladies who do our nails, who do our hair, how much money they make a day, so that they can decide how much to tax them. So you see, the minister is desperate to get money, and we're okay with that. But we're saying the problem is, where is that money going? Because I don't mind being taxed whatever it is, but we need to know where is the money going, how is the money being used.
All right, thank you, Buffet. Very useful intervention there. Kudzi, you're not going to have it as easy as Ranga and Butle have had. I'm going to ask you, because you are also you're deep in politics and you understand this better than we do. How much of succession politics is going to play in the economy? Our viewers would want to know.
Okay, thank you, Mr. T. Okay, before I answer your question, I think I want to clarify that it seems as if the economy is quite chaotic and the whole issue is structural, where the government is doing everything in the economy, whether it's in agriculture, they are funding agriculture. When you go to energy, they want to be the ones producing power. Yet you can put incentives, you can put policies that will end up attracting the private sector, and they should be doing that. When it comes to succession politics, we have already seen some slogans now. We don't know how they're going to culminate. We don't even know the horses in the race. So it's quite murky. I believe 2025 is going to be better. 2026, that's when we're going to see the effects of succession politics. Obviously, it's going to disrupt the economy because a lot of sloganeering, a lot of populism, and once politicians are in their contest, nothing really goes on. No one is focusing on delivery. Everyone is focusing on getting power. That's a risk that we face now. I'm not sure how it's going to go, but it's something that we should watch out.
Well, we're going to be inviting you as often as possible. You've got a better, sit at the table, so you understand this better. But coming to the Reserve Bank, the central bank, when you look at the central bank, what do you think is going to happen in 2025? What are your thoughts there? Do you think that John II has the mantle to control money supply and to make the country better?
I think it all depends on the government. So far, we saw this year when there was an explosion in the ZiG when it was devaluated. If you can trace it, you find that it was due to the SADC summit expenditure there. It contributed to the whole devaluation of the ZiG. That's a fact that was not admitted in public, but we know that was the source of the devaluation. We see now the government was struggling to pay their civil servants in ZiG. They were struggling there, and they kept the tap closed, as it were. Otherwise, they had a choice to print the money, and we're going to see inflation. So, as much as John II has all the power, he's the governor, the results depends on the government's behavior. If the government is going to behave in terms of expenditure, his job is going to be easy, and we're going to see stability. But I believe politically, there is no will to devalue again. People were quite angry when the ZiG was devaluated last time. I don't think they're eager to see the anger again. So we expect discipline in 2025 and stability for the ZiG. I'm quite hopeful on that one.
Well, thank you very much for the optimism. Brains, you disappeared, but let's hear more from you. What are your thoughts on 2025? Are we going to see more taxes and more regulation? And what would you like to see? Brains, is he still there? Okay.
But it's frozen.
It's frozen. Okay. All right. I suppose, Janet, you can come in. What would you like to see in 2025?
What I would do Yes, thank you, Tinashe. What I would like to say, and I want to come in because my colleagues have really covered the other areas. I'll come back on the debt issue and link it with what Botle spoke about in terms of transparency and accountability. I think there has been a lot of indiscipline within our debt management frameworks in terms of government publicly guaranteed debts. There's really been indiscipline in terms of really the instruments that have been used in terms of bailouts. So I think we really need to move towards debt transparency and actually accountability, and where the Public Debt Management Office really does its work. We need to push for regular debt sustainability analysis. I think this is one big issue that probably our annual debt bulletin should be looking at in terms of really sharing on the debt sustainability levels. Because right now we are way beyond our thresholds in terms of our constitution, in terms of our Public Debt Act, in terms of even the SADC protocol that has got the thresholds that we have to meet. I think there's so much indiscipline there that we need to deal with, and probably for the government to really come out strong on that aspect. There's also the issue, of course, of the high-level debt dialogue platform that was created in terms of, is it a platform that we're continuing to use? If we are, how are we doing in terms of the reforms that the government itself actually created in terms of, this is what we're going to do when it comes to economic reforms. We're going to deal with the forex issue. We're going to deal with issues around fiscal discipline, remove quasi-fiscal activities of the RBZ. All those reforms, we need to be looking at them. The governance reforms themselves, they really bring a very strong component. Before we even talk about our human rights context, they speak to issues around accountability and dealing with corruption and really building, once again, institutions of oversight. How are we going to deal with that as reforms that we need to do? And in 2025, it may be good to really go deep into those reforms. The other one is around the land reform. I think quite a number are dealing with that issue, especially from the creditor side in terms of the government meeting its obligations. So I think it's about discipline, which to me is the deficit when I'm looking at it. It could be from all the other sectors that colleagues have shared, but also from the debt perspective. Because if we are going to move this needle, it's going to take discipline. It's going to take discipline in implementing the reforms that we are talking about. Within that same space, because it's very difficult as well, the reforms that we are talking about, is also to see in terms of the resources being allocated to the social, in terms of the social impact measures, in terms of making sure that we address the challenges that the citizens are currently facing. I know within that space they've been talking about a wet staff monitored program that really caters for the social services like education, climate change impacts, and quite enough. I think there are about 5 areas that they've said would need social investments in. How are we going to fund those? What kind of partnerships are we going to get into those to ensure that the citizens are cushioned in the informal sector, relieve the burden of care on women and girls? All those issues are really critical with where we are going. My hope in 2025 was to see how we also broaden the domestic investor base. I think we talk a lot about the foreign direct investment, but what is it that we can do in terms of broadening our domestic investor base? Quite a number of various taxes have been introduced, but how are they limiting in terms of our growth, in terms of citizens playing a part as well within the economy? I think it's really, really a big issue. I'm looking forward in 2025, Tinashe, on the legal reform aspects. The issue of the Public Finance Management Act amendment is on the legislative agenda for the 10th Parliament. I think we really need to make sure that we have concluded on that issue of the Public Finance Management Act, of the Public Debts the Act, in terms of their amendments, in ensuring that there is oversight, there is discipline, There is improved debt reporting and transparency, and also building the capacity of our government, especially the Public Debt Management Office, in terms of enhancing its capacity in managing, reporting debts, and all those issues. So I think there is really a lot, but it falls on the seat of the government in terms of the discipline that we need to see and the reforms that we need to really engage with for us to be able to get into meaningful dialogue with our creditors, for us to get into meaningful dialogue with our industry, to get into meaningful dialogue in terms of how we can deal with our domestic debt issue, which is increasing, I would say, at a rate that is not healthy, and that has led us to where we are in terms of the unsustainable debt ratios that we currently have. So I think I'll be watching out in terms of the discipline and engagement and the transparency that has to come with that.
All right.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, everybody. I don't know if Brains, you can hear us. Brains, Mugutinzwere, Bambo.
I can hear you, Tinashe. I think
fantastic.
there's a lot of sabotage there's some sabotage that is happening, because the moment you call my name, the frogs around here are just cutting off the network. So I think there's a problem.
All right.
Maybe it's what you're smoking.
Yeah, I've actually cut it out. So I think now it's going to be okay.
All right. Okay. So for you, Brains, maybe the question to you is just a simple and straightforward one. What do we need to do as business going into 2025?
I think what we need to manage costs, Tinashe. 2025 is going to be very difficult from a cost management perspective. Number one, you find a lot of these companies have linked their costs to the exchange rate, and that is going to be proved to be very difficult next year, because I expect steep movement in the ZiG exchange rate at a time where the ZiG will not be available in the market. I expect as well that the Reserve Bank is going to be very aggressive in trying to mop up the excess liquidity. Understand that the budget is the minister is expecting to increase revenue collection by 145% thereabout. But when you look at the mathematics, it doesn't seem to be right. You see, you can't expect to increase your revenues to 7 billion, to increase by 145% to 7 billion. Somehow, something is very wrong there. So what I expect, therefore, is that there will be a lot of money supply that will be coming into the market, and the Reserve Bank is going to be overly aggressive. And what it means, therefore, is that the banks will find it very difficult in the market to maintain low interest rates. So those that are borrowing expect that the interest rates are going to be quite steep, and expect as well that the banks are going to be calling on their low maturing facilities. I expect a lot of banks to start cutting back on lending next year. And on the other hand, look, I don't expect a lot of change on the disposable income perspective. And in as much as the government is expecting to bring in a lot of people into the tax net, I still believe and expect that the informal sector is too clever for the government. You see, the people that you find in the informal sector are not your ordinary people out there. These are look, what would I say? For example, you find executives, those that used to be executives, ex-bankers, ex-what, engineers, and so on. Those are the guys that are running the informal sector. So the informal sector, these are very clever people. And when you look at the informal sector in Zimbabwe, Tinashe, you will discover that it's not necessarily an informal sector that is sitting on its own. It's an informal sector that is being fed by the formal sector. When you look at the commodities market, for example, most of the goods that you find in the informal sector are coming from the formal sector. So it's not an informal sector that is standing on its own and the formal sector that is on the other side. It's just an informal sector that has decided to probably avoid, the traditional channels of making goods to the market. So because of that, we don't expect that the government is going to collect as much revenue as it expects, and therefore, you expect that the expenditures in the market are going to remain quite constrained unless the government prints money. And when it prints money, it becomes a tax. And that tax definitely would devalue, earnings for businesses. So it's going to be a very difficult year. What I would expect is for the government to actually, look, I don't understand this business of the government every time expecting a higher budget. This year is 110, you expect the next year to be 270. I would love one day, Tinashe, to experience or to actually listen to a budget statement where the minister is saying, last year I collected 110 billion. Next year I expect to collect $110 billion. That is the only way we will manage money supply. When you look at how money supply has been growing, especially the ZIG money supply, it's astonishing. You see, it's quite astonishing. And at that rate, you don't expect us to manage inflation. We can manage it on paper, but you can't manage the exchange rate. So next year is definitely going to be a slightly difficult year on account of the money supply that is going to be pouring in the market emanating from the government, unless the government decides to say, okay, we'll only spend that which we would have collected. Because the problem with the budget is that once the government has approved the budgets, the expenditures for these ministries, they start expending. Sometimes they start borrowing from the market, or no one knows. Maybe they start printing as well. Because once you approve an expenditure for 210 billion from 270, from 110 billion, look, it's already inflationary. So I expect that the market will remain difficult for next year, and businesses should understand that the only way to survive is to manage costs. Managing costs, reducing borrowing levels, to the gearing levels. Going forward, you expect banks will be calling up on all loans that are maturing. I don't expect most of these banks to be actually rolling over facilities, because as we speak right now, there's a serious liquidity crunch in the market. And even if I was a banker, really, I wouldn't really be rolling over facilities, because there's quite a crunch that is in the market. And the Reserve Bank, unfortunately, because it will be trying to clean the fiscal mess, it then steps up, in terms of mopping up excess liquidity, and in the process, issuing more NNCDs and so on. And it's the banks that suffer. And when the banks suffer, they pass on the cost to the general economy. The frogs have not been listening.
Share, you're not on mute, so we couldn't hear you.
Tinashe, you're on mute, yeah? Can anyone hear Tinashe, or is me alone?
Can you hear me now?
No, we can't hear Tinashe. Yes.
Is it clear now?
I can't hear him.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay,
all right. Okay, I was just saying thank you very much for giving us your views on 2024 and 2025. That was very useful, and I think our audience really benefit from that analysis and thoughts. Thank you very much, and I hope that you join us again every Friday. And just for the purposes of Friday drinks, you need to be drinking something on a Friday. So we need to see you drinking something. So that's for next time. Otherwise, have yourself a wonderful weekend. Cheers. We'll come back to the studio and I'll ask Shumba and Zia what they think. Just a summary of everything that we've had. We'll start with you, Shumba. What are your thoughts? Mazinzwa.
Well, first I want to give credit to Sue's Bakery and Delicatessens for giving us a cheese board, which has a lovely variety of cheeses. So thank you so much, Sue.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
So yeah, look, I think, I'm an internal optimist. So there are a lot of headwinds going into next year. We don't know what the rainy season is going to be like. I've heard reporting that we might have a drought for a second consecutive year, which would be quite bad for us. We have all these headwinds, which a lot of, which your panel spoke to. The debt is a challenge. Taxation is a challenge. Government expenditure is a challenge. And, I appreciate and understand those headwinds. But I'm of the school of thought that necessity is the mother of invention, right? So when you're in trouble, when you hit rock bottom, you're actually more likely to pivot and do things differently. And I think that that's where we are as a country, and certainly government of Zimbabwe in terms
So
of...
what's the tailwind?
Oh, we've got... So the tailwind is this hardship that we have a drought, that the books aren't balancing for government of Zimbabwe.
So the headwind turns into a tailwind.
Yes, because if they continue, they're just going to go bust.
Okay.
And it's going to be a rewind of 2008. Empty supermarket shelves.
So if I get you correctly, you're just saying that we're about to research.
That's my sense.
We should prepare for it.
Absolutely.
You think it's going to happen in 2025?
Oh, yeah.
Zia. Muruzinzo.
Okay.
What are your thoughts?
Well, things will get worse. So I always want to separate between what I wish for and what's likely to happen by just looking at the data. So I'm wishing for all the positives that maybe some of our panelists have spoken about, and there is and what Shumba is talking about, that maybe necessity is the mother of all invention. But the reality, the way I see it, is things will actually get worse. We already have got indications or pointers of how life is going to be in 2025. Aggressive tax collection methods. So they are going after cross-border buses. They're going after professional groups. They're going after churches. They're pretty much going after everyone. I think that just tells you the mindset. You are not seeing any signals around maybe trying to grow the economy, trying to grow the cake, but there's that aggressiveness. What happens if all those efforts have failed to yield the outcome that they're looking for? So they don't get as much money from the churches, from the buses, from the professionals. So, what's next?
But I'll push back a little bit.
No. Let me finish. You have articulated your point. I'm sure the audience will then maybe just tell us what they think. So I'm actually expecting things to actually get worse in 2025. Everything that you are seeing today, which is not looking good, I think when you're in 2025 around this time, you look back at 25 and like, geez, it was much better then.
So I tend to agree with everything that you said, by the way. So where I want to push back is that in principle, right? I think that, so we have this, and you're the lawyer amongst us, right? We have these laws on the books. We have these statutes, rules and regulations. And they dictate how we behave, the three of us, because we're engaged in the formal sector, right? We run businesses that pay VAT, that pay payroll taxes, that pay corporate tax. And I suspect that's true for a lot of our viewers, right? They are in the formal sector, and that's how they do business. And I actually think that one of the reasons why we've seen the informal sector take market share from the formal sector is because they've been able to get away with running a business, right? Actually building, because these tuck shops, right? They're not shacks, right? Some of them are actually quite impressive in terms of the structure. Right, you can see that meaningful amount of capital has been deployed in building this thing that's a tuck shop, and they're selling stuff. And they're not paying VAT. They're not paying any of these taxes. They are not licensed in any way, right? So they're going to do better than a Spar, a Pick and Pay, okay? And I think that it's fantastic that the state has decided that these guys can't get a free ride. They need to come to the party just like we do, right? And the state actually has the machinery to police them, to say, listen, where's your VAT registration? Where's your payroll registration? Where's your license for X and Y and Z that Ranga and Tinashe and their respective businesses have, right? So I don't think it's a bad thing. I don't think it's the government overreaching and overtaxing. I think it's fantastic for the formal sector that the state is saying to the informal sector, actually, the rules that apply to the formal sector, the law that applies to the formal sector applies to you guys as well.
Well, there you heard it. Truly is on the right path, going after the church mouse. But interesting discussions. This has been our longest session. I thought Comrade Kaskwere had a lot to say. No.
Yeah, we should have him again, for sure.
We should, eh?
And we should have Ambassador again.
For the same panel?
Yeah, that'll be fun. I think that'll be very good fun.
Well, I think thank you very much, everybody. I think we've covered most of what we needed to cover for 2024 and going into next year. And I think, Xavier Kaskwera gave us a glimpse of what actually happens in cabinet. And I think that's why we do it. That's the reason why we do it is because a lot of us as business people are not aware of what actually happens, the dynamics that actually happen in government or in cabinet and how decisions are made. So it's always very useful when these guys can share their time and share their thoughts and be open about it. So let's support them and let's make sure that they actually open up a whole lot more, because we're the only, that's how we benefit from the discussions. So otherwise, we're going to have a lovely Friday and weekend. I'm looking forward to it, and have yourself a wonderful weekend. Cheers.